So what we have here is a thought process on perspective. Perspective is fed by divergent and convergent thinking. I have a little bit of a mapped out math graph here of how awareness, raw perspective, and understood or untangled or the word escapes me, but understood perspective is the growth of raw perspective. Perspective runs in layers. It's more of a fluid, so expanding your mind. If your mind is in the middle, thought processes run out. Paths are reciprocal. So the information that they experience feeds back into the central mind, central thought process zone. Each path of thought is a combination of raw perspective and realized perspective. Each path is reciprocal relationship. That sort of speaks to the divergent thinking, prefaces it, and then the path at which what you take in goes back is convergent thinking. And this is the process of untangling raw perspective, ultimately acquiring realized perspective. The realized perspective then feeds back in and is your perspective, your active perspective, in which the world is both experienced and understood. So basically the path of information can be taken in from out here, brought back in, informing a new perspective, which then could understand this line of thought a much different way, much more elaborately, or could completely delete it or erase it completely from mind based on what realization has happened. This is sort of what perspective fills all of this area, and each subsection of the perspective are potential domains, and I highlighted this one as educational. So you have formal education within that, you have a non-formal education, traditional, non-traditional, all interwoven into this very fluid box, which basically states that each pane is a sliced different layers of information. And they're fluid layers because the reciprocal action of thought and understanding and perspective feeds back to the mind, which doesn't allow for your space perspective to stay solid. It's very fluid, and it fluctuates based on the relationship of understanding, realized perspective, compared back to what is in that sort of world of potential perspective. So you have awareness plus raw perspective, which is everything that's inside of the area, and that equals raw information. So full levels of associations, databases of information, domains of information, schools of thought. That raw information is then combined with your perspective, and that equals understanding. Once that understanding goes back in, you can recycle that and go through the same paths of thought. Hypothetically, the more you understand about psychology, gives you the perspective to understand psychological theories much more deeply, sociological theories, what have you. You have the ability, once you take that information in, to perceive things much differently, with a much more deeper level of awareness, potentially. Can perspectives be translated? How and in what forms? And we see expression expressed a multitude of different ways. We have art, math, science, written, verbal. language based on, informed by culture, et cetera, et cetera. The number of different types that you express yourself, other people express themselves on a daily day, are exponentially great and couldn't all be listed, obviously. But think of what it means to express something and at what vehicle is moving your expression and what is packaged within that expression. So all of these modes of expression inform and transmit ideas. They package the ideas differently. So does this different package affect the meaning, or is it a different vehicle for transmission? And should we judge based on the vehicle chosen? This basically is a idea of thought, exercise of thought. Imagine a classroom as a beach, specifically a beach with an expanse of sand and water. How many different configurations and forms can be constructed with the available resources? Think of sandcastle competitions. How many different forms of sandcastles are created from the same resources? Some having stronger effectiveness than others in different contexts. Same goes for how many configurations and forms can be created with people in an environment. And if you define those people in the environment as a classroom, you have teachers, students, in the environment as a whole, how many different ways can you configure that to produce different effective configurations, goals? So that is basically today's thought. This chart down here basically highlights awareness and perspective. At the lower end, you have a lower level of awareness, and at the upper end, you have a greater potential of perspective. Awareness and perspective speak together, as the greater potential amount of awareness that you have, the greater amount of awareness that you have, the greater depth of understanding that you have for the perspective. So if you have a large expansive perspective and a large mode of awareness, you have the ability to understand a multitude of things at a very depth level, which can be overwhelming at times. With that said, that is all.